Hi, Angie here from Crafts at Home. Welcome back to this video series where I'm going to be featuring the art of quilting from Shape Artworks. Hopefully you've completed all the blocks up till now and have them stored ironed and flat ready for joining in later issues. With this issue we'll be making the complicated basket of flowers block, and you'll be receiving the white on white spot, daisy, paisley and blossom fabrics. Before you begin, make sure you iron all of your fabric so it's nice and flat. It'll make it easier to work with and improve the overall finish of your quilt. Let's start marking and cutting. So as per the cutting layouts that you'll find on page 54 of your magazine, I've already done these. Now you need to take a note with your daisy and your blossom. When you're cutting out your templates on these, mark one side with the writing up, flip over and mark the other side with the writing down, and that way you'll get the diamonds working perfectly on your flower. This did catch us out in a few previous issues, so it's just worth noting to make sure that you got your layouts ready and correct to make it sit properly fabric to fabric. So I've gone and marked on all four fabrics and I'm just about to start cutting out now. I'm going to start with the daisy. I'm going to try and do it so I save as much material as possible, just in case I have an issue with any further cuts that I make. That's why I do change my layouts of fabric sometimes, just so I can make sure I can save as much material as possible in case I do make any mistakes, and I can go back and use up the scraps. With this issue you'll see it more on the white, where I've moved it around. As you can see, I've got all of this white material spare now, just in case I make any mistakes. I've got it there. So I'm just going to continue to cut these. Cut the points off. Take all my excess to the side. And just trim that point off as well. So there's my two offset diamonds in the daisy. I'm going to carry on now with the blossom, and I will see you back here in a moment for the pinning. Hi! So as you can see, I've now laid out all of my pieces as they are with the final block. Now you will notice that my blossom and daisy is a different way around to the way it shows in the magazine. It's only because I always mark my fabric on the wrong side, where within the magazine it seems to always be marked on the right side of the fabric. So first of all, this is a more complicated block, so you need to take more care and time over your pinning and prepping, making sure you've got your 6mm seam and following every step in order. So to start with, we'll take out everything apart from your red and your yellows. You want to take the two petals on the left hand side and fold them right side to right side, making sure that those short edges match. So just make sure, take some time, and make sure it all matches up properly. And then pin a 90-degree angle to that short edge. And you want to do exactly the same with these two. So again, fold over, match up along that short edge, making sure that you've got everything just right, and pin. Now with this block especially, where you've got that white triangle, where those two will open up, if you wanted to, you could mark your 6mm seam allowance on all of these three pieces, just so you get it perfect. Because I've got the markings on my sewing machine, I'm going to go off that. So I'm just going to go and chain piece these two edges together, and I'll see you back in a moment at the sewing machine. So as you can see, I've got two parts of the flower already pinned. So the first one's going to go in. Just because of the way I work, I'm going to make sure that this leading edge goes in first. So just take that up to your needle, making sure that you keep to your seam allowance, and sew up to the first pin. Take that one out, and then carry on to the next. And carry on to the end. I'm going to do the same again on this one. So pop it in, up towards the needle, onto the first pin. Stop just before it so you don't actually hit the pin. I've actually done that once and I broke my needle and I jammed the pin down in the machine, and it took quite a lot to actually get it out. So that's why you always stop just before the pin and take it out before you go over it. Just take the stitch saver off the back, pop that back in. And then snip these two apart. So I'm just about to iron these open now. I will see you over at the ironing board. So we're going to do a bit different here to what we normally would. Where we'd normally iron these open and then pin the next piece on, we're going to skip the ironing. So you want to open both sets. So you've got the V, the open V towards you. Then you want to take the first piece of your white triangles and go that way. So if you've marked on the wrong side of the fabric, it will be on the yellow. If you've marked on the right side of the fabric, it'll be the white. But as long as you make sure, if you work in that inner V, you work on that side. Match these corners here. So the tip and pin on that top edge. It's important to make sure that you get everything right at this stage. It is a more complicated block and you've got to take your time over it. So we pin that open, and then we'll do exactly the same on this one. So you have your fabric, going to work on the right side up and then turn it over. Again, match on that top point. And pin. Make sure everything lines up nicely, you're not pulling on that bias edge. And pin there as well. So now we're going to turn over. When you sew it through your sewing machine or hand stitch, whichever's easiest, you might find hand stitching better on this one. You go from that point, you sew down and you sew up to that seam and pop a few reinforcement stitches there, whether it's hand stitching or a little bit of reverse on your machine, whichever's easiest for you, but you stop at the seam. You can fold that down, you can fold that back, but do not iron yet. So I'm going to go and do both of these seams and I'll see you back here in a moment. So now we should have something like this. None of your seams are ironed yet, but we will go back and sort them out. So you want to do exactly the same, but on the other side with that corner. So you want to fold this up and fold it across. So the first corner you want to match is that top corner there. Just try and push that white triangle through. So make sure your seam is lying nice and straight. It will improve the look of it if you get it right now. Then you want to pin a little bit further down. Again, just make sure that it's lying nice and straight, as flat as you can. Any excess material, there shouldn't be, but if there is, just make sure it lies nice and flat as you can get it. So we're then going to do the other one. So again, take that corner of white to that corner, flip it up, make it lie as nice and flat as you possibly can along that seam, making sure, because you've got the bias edge again, you're not stretching, and just pin through. Again, just pin a bit further down, making sure you've got the rest of the white point pointing up. Now, the way we're going to sew this one, turn over so that white is pointing down. You fold that yellow back without ironing, and you fold down along that seam and iron there. I'll do exactly the same on this one. So yellow down, fold it back so that is straight. Make sure you've got that as straight as possible. And then sew along that seam. So I'm going to go and do these, and I'll be back in a moment. So you've now got these three pieces together. We are now going to iron these. The way you want to look at it is you want your seams on your white triangle flat. So stretch that out and make sure that you iron those down. And then towards, on this case, the yellow. So get everything as flat as possible. Then when you turn it over, you've got a nice sharp point in the middle. So I'm going to do exactly the same with this one. Good to take some time over your ironing here, just to make sure that everything goes right. So again, you've got your white triangle nice and flat. And going towards the yellow blossom. So, now we've got that far. Next thing is to match up these two and pin together. Now you have got a butting seam there, so pin that together first, and then match the corners there. So it's a good idea to put a couple of reinforcement stitches at both sides. I don't normally, but because this is a more intricate pattern and the way that we're doing it, we're not going over the seams all the time. I am just going to put a couple of reinforcement back stitches at beginning and end. So I'm going to pop and do this, and I'll be back in a moment. So we've just gone down and done that seam there. So you open out and you've got what will be the tip of the block. So we're going to do the same here that we did for these corners. So you want to make sure you've got your fabric up the right way. Match in to your first corner. Now, whichever you find easiest to do, I'm actually going to go on this red one first. So again, make sure you're right side to right side. And pop a pin in so you're matching your corner first. And then pop a pin further down. So it's the same principle as we did last time. So it's going from there, having that folded down, and going to that seam. You can see where you've got your stitches there, so you're going to go up to there and pop a couple of reinforcement stitches just in there, and I'll see you back for the next one. So now we've got that seam done there, we're going to do this one. It's the same process of what we did with these, but because it's a 90-degree angle and it's sharper than that, I'd say hold that back, get that corner there and swivel round up to that point. Then just make sure everything is pointing the right way. Match your seams up there. Pop a pin through. Now as that's going there, I'm going to choke it out, fold that down and then put my pin back in. So then the next seam you want to be sewing, you want to have that flat, fold that back, and sew along that seam there. So take your time to try and lay everything as flat as possible. And there we are. So I'm going to go and battle with this and I'll be back in a moment. So now I've added that square into the corner, we're going to iron it out. Now we want to iron it so all the seams face towards that corner. So first of all, just lay it out, make sure that everything looks right and it's all matching. And then you want to iron your seams as flat as possible, all pointing towards this corner. It's really not an easy block to do. But we have just finished the hardest part. So next you want to take your large green paisley and that will go the bottom here. So I would say flip it over and match that way, just so you can see everything. You can keep all of your seams nice and flat because there is a lot of them there, and with them all going in different directions it doesn't help. but it's easy from here on in. So just make sure everything lines up nicely. All your pinning is straight. I'm going to go off centre and do one each side of all of those centre seams. And again, a nice tip when you're sewing, you'll see you've got your seams here where your triangles actually meet. You are going to lose some of that just because of the complexity, but if you can get where you've got that little crossover there, it is a little bit less on here than my 6mm, so I'm just going to adjust my seam very slightly just to get those points to meet into the middle. I'm going to sew this and I'll see you back here in a moment. 7. So I've now gone and sewn along that edge there. I'm just going to set it down and then iron out towards the paisley. So we've now got a smaller square to what we finish off with. As you can see, that's come up quite nicely there. So just for a moment we're going to set that aside and we're going to bring in the small paisley triangles and the white on white rectangles. So we're going to pin these together, right side to right side. Just flip up and pin along this short edge here. Going to do the same on this one, so again, short edge to short edge. I'm going to pop and get these two sewn and I'll be back in a moment. Hi, so as you can see I've now sewn along these two seams here. We're going to iron them open towards the white. So we'll set the seams, turn over and iron open onto the white. Now if we bring in the small square that we've got done so far, you can actually see how this is starting to come together. So I'm going to take that piece away first. If you line up that side, if you line up to this edge, then you'll make sure you've got a nice square block when you've finished. And flip that over. Now, looking at it, if I run it through from this end, it's going to push those seams down nicely. And I can just make sure that that tucks in properly when it comes through the machine. So I'm going to stick with this side. Line up my edge. Make sure I pin that seam down just to make sure as it runs through that it does stay nice and flat. I'm going to do the same on that seam there. Same on that one. And then one in the end. So I'm going to pop and sew along this seam, and I'll be back in a moment. So I've gone and sewn along this edge here. I've made sure that all my seams are nice and flat in both edges, and we're just about to iron this open. So set your seam to start with and then iron out towards the edge. So that's one side on. Now we're going to pop and do the other side. Exactly the same as you did before. So you square up that side first and then flip over. So I'm going to pop the pin in the end and then run towards that middle seam. So there we are. Now I'm going to just run this through the sewing machine and I'll be back in a moment. So now I've sewn along that edge there. As you can see, when it opens up, although these looked a bit longer and out of space, they match up to create that perfect 45-degree angle. So we're just going to iron this open. And again, we go towards the outside. And there is that nice straight seam for adding the final piece. So we'll bring in our final piece, which is the white spot and spot triangle. Now I'm actually going to lie that down first face up and put this one on top, just so I can get it matching perfectly and I can be careful of all my seams. So I'm going to pin at the end there, make sure it's all straight, being careful because we are working with a bias edge. I'm going to pin and step in because we've got lots of seams there. I'm just going to step that one in and then carry on to the end. So I'm going to go and sew this last seam and I'll be back for the final ironing. So as you can see, I've now sewn across that final seam. So first of all, we're going to set it and then iron open towards that white triangle. And there we go, that is our basket of flowers block completed. By taking time and making sure that everything was matched up nicely, all my edges are perfectly straight. I've got a nice 6mm seam allowance ready for adding on the sashing of the other blocks, and it's all ironed nicely. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and the block that we've created. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified of our new videos. Further information about Crafts at Home Forum, the Art of Quilting and Hash-Shape Artworks can be found on the social media pages which are listed in the description. Don't forget to join us next week for issue 15 where we'll be making the Susanna block. Bye for now.